Have you felt overwhelmed on this prepping journey or felt like maybe you're not getting it all right? Don't worry, that is super common. Today, we're going to talk about 10 mistakes that I made when I started my prepping journey and how you can avoid them. Hey, welcome back to Preparedness, where we are all about being prepared and not scared. Today, what I want to do is just share 10 mistakes that I think I have made in my prepping journey to hopefully help you not have to make them. Mistake number 1. Buying things off of other people's prepping list. So when I first started getting prepared and thinking about what I wanted to do to get ready for emergencies, I went down the Pinterest rabbit hole, the Google rabbit hole, and I would find lists that preppers had put together about all the things that you needed to buy and you should have. And I was just going down those lists and just buying without really thinking what it was that I was preparing for. And so I think that is a big, super common mistake. And so what I would say is when we're starting stuff, it's really easy to look at the people who have gone ahead of us and go, I'm just going to do what they do because that must work. And yes, sometimes looking at those lists can be helpful to help you think about things that maybe you haven't thought through. But as you are getting ready to start your prepping journey, what I would encourage you to do is figure out what it is that you want to plan for and then create your list of things that you need based on those requirements. The second mistake that I made was just not starting with skills at the very beginning of my prepping journey. Again, I had this mentality that if I just bought enough stuff, that then I would be prepared for emergency situations. And I think one of the things that really can help you is to build skills along the way. Now, those skills can be anything from cooking from scratch to figuring out how to cook with freeze-dried stuff to figuring out how to make your homemade candles or learning how to run your house without power. All of those things are skills that you can look at to start developing. The third mistake I made was spending money on what I'm going to call cheap prepping items. So if you have done much Googling, you've probably seen the lists that are like the 50 items you must buy at the dollar store or the cheapest things that you can do to be prepared. Here's what I will say with that. There is nothing wrong with using the dollar store to buy things or finding things on sale or looking at those lists. But again, it goes a little bit back to the number one piece is I rushed out and I bought a lot of what I will really consider junk now to get me going down that prepping journey where really if I had just saved a little bit more money, I could have invested in higher quality things. So when you start looking at the things that you're going to buy, I would encourage you to save the money and buy high quality items that you know are going to last versus some of maybe those lower quality items. Again, that is not to say that there's not some great prepping things at the dollar store. We buy stuff there still, and those are things that are useful, but don't just rush out and again buy the cheap stuff because it makes you feel more prepared. The reality is a lot of times that cheap stuff won't last in an emergency situation, and the last thing you want is to think that your family is prepared and then pick up, like I said, that flashlight or whatever the thing is and turn it on or try to use it and find out that it's not really of high quality and that it doesn't last. I would love to hear the 1 or 2 mistakes that you feel like you have made on this prepping journey, because again, sometimes we learn the best from learning from other people and what not to do. So mistake number 4, we've talked about it a little bit in the Food 101 section, was just I didn't have a clear plan on my menu items for what I wanted to use in an emergency situation. And so what that led me to do was to rush out again to Sam's and Costco and buy a lot of things in bulk that then I realized my family didn't use on a regular basis. And because I didn't have a solid meal plan, I couldn't really come up with the things that I knew I needed to buy. And so that was really stressful. So if you haven't done it already, I would encourage you to think about the meals that you already make, that your family already enjoys, and then create yourself a menu that you can use to really guide you in the types of foods that you want to store. And if you haven't done so already, check out my food storage video here that talks all through how to create that menu item and to kind of get your food storage ready. The 5th one, closely related, was not rotating that food. So again, one of the challenges I had was because I didn't have a menu list and because I wasn't using my food on a regular basis, I didn't rotate things. And so 6 months and a year into my prepping journey, when I went down to my basement to look at all of my emergency food storage, I realized that I had a lot of food that was expired. So one, I just hate letting food go to waste because I feel like it's not really great stewardship of like the things that we use. And so it was very frustrating from that perspective. productive, but it was also a little bit concerning because I realized that a lot of the food that in my brain I had to keep us safe may not have been edible if we had needed it in an emergency situation. So again, to get around that, you need to have a plan for how you are going to rotate your food and how you're going to rotate your supplies so that you make sure that the things that you are using are going to be ready in that emergency situation, regardless of what you are facing. The sixth mistake I made was just not actually thinking through the emergencies I was preparing for until I had been doing this for probably almost a year and a half. I sort of just knew I wanted to be prepared for all emergencies, but I hadn't really stopped to think through what really did I think could happen here in Colorado. What were my most likely scenarios that I was going to face? In military planning terms, we use things like most likely, most dangerous, and we kind of plan stuff around those. And what I was doing was just kind of throwing stuff at the wall again, looking at those lists that someone had said, you need these 10 things and you'll be prepared. And instead of really thinking about, no kidding, what do I think is most likely and most dangerous here where I live? Thinking through the emergency situations that you are preparing for will allow you to shape what you are purchasing and how you are storing it so that you know how to get out of your house if you need to, or you know how to stay in your house if you need to. The seventh thing that I didn't do originally was set a budget. So it's gonna sound a little bit silly, but again, prepping can be this sort of deep, dark rabbit hole that you can go down. And if you are not careful, it can get pretty expensive. Now, I will tell you, we have invested quite a bit of money in our preparedness, but that doesn't mean that we have just gone out willy-nilly. The first few months, I went a little crazy and I didn't really have a plan, which led to some months where we probably overspent on what we should have. So think about, no kidding, what is in your budget? What are you willing to put aside to go towards this prepping space that you have? Set that budget early, know what it is, and then you can start prioritizing and racking and stacking when it is you're gonna buy food, or when you are gonna buy a solar generator, or when you're gonna buy some other higher ticket item. We wanna be fiscally responsible when we go down this path, and really having a set budget just frees up your mind to know, okay, I'm comfortable spending this amount of money, whatever that dollar amount is each month, and that is just a great way to get more organized moving forward. The eighth mistake I made was just not getting organized from the very beginning. So if you went down the path that I did, where you looked at those lists and you just started buying stuff, you're probably shoving things in corners. It can be complicated to stay organized when you are bringing additional supplies into your house. And so what I would just encourage you is figure out 2 or 3 places in your home that you want to store emergency supplies. Maybe you're going to dedicate a specific closet to your prepping supplies, or a specific part of your pantry for your long-term food storage. Whatever it is, you want to be really intentional about where you put your supplies. So here's the perfect storm. It's when you don't have a budget, when you're following somebody else's list and you're not staying organized. And what that does is it leads to a lot of redundancy, and it can lead to a lot of chaos. So instead, be really intentional. How many flashlights do you really need for your house? Maybe it's 3 or 4, whatever the number is, right? You need to decide what your family is comfortable with. The ninth mistake that I made was just feeling like I needed to do everything all at once. I recognized that there were some dangers out there that I was nervous about. I recognized that there were some threats, and I tried to get ready for everything. So this is going to go back into knowing what emergency you are planning for. Figure out, again, the things that you think are most likely and most dangerous that your family wants to be prepared for, and then come up with your strategy for that 1 or 2 things. But don't let overwhelm slow you down, because again, when you get into this space and you start watching videos and you start reading lists and you read the books, and if you're like me, you're a researcher and you get way too involved in all this, it can be incredibly daunting, right? Because there are a lot of things that people recommend that may or may not be right for your family. But don't let it overwhelm you, because what I find is when we get overwhelmed, we stop taking action. And what we want to do is take small, consistent steps. Consistency is absolutely the key in terms of preparedness, because it is an ongoing process that we want to develop as we grow. And the 10th mistake that I made that is somewhat controversial is that I didn't talk to family and friends about my preparedness journey until I had been in this space for probably 2, maybe almost 3 years. And I think there is still a stigma that comes with the word prepper, right? Like this idea that somehow we're crazy or that we have lost our marbles, right? But I think when we don't have conversations about it, when we don't talk about it, all we're really doing is not helping protect the people that we care about. So What I wouldn't do is go out and tell all of your friends and family that they absolutely need to be a prepper and they should jump on board and give them the 100-item list that you think they need to go buy supplies. If you were listening, that was like what not to do on step number 1. Instead, what I think there are good things to do is just say, hey, have you ever thought about what you guys would do if you broke down in your car in an emergency situation? Do you have stuff that you could replace a tire or stay in your car for a couple of hours until emergency personnel could respond? Those are practical conversations that we can have. Another option is just to look at the news around us. There are emergency situations all over the world on a weekly, if not a daily basis. And so using those as conversation starters can be a great way to kind of broach the subject of prepping with your family and friends. So that's it for today, guys. Thank you so much for being here. If you haven't done so already, hit like, hit subscribe, and I will see you next week. Until next time, let's be prepared, not scared.